Oh hey, I have an 800-page essay due in 2 days about a popular video game company that makes video games, but that's just the thing. I don't know what to write about.
Can't you just find any video game company?
Shut up. I'm in the middle of a crisis here. Not only is my essay due in 2 days, but I haven't even wrote my name. What am I supposed to do? Well, at least it's not Sega.
Remember when Capcom made other games?
They did?
I know, crazy, right? It's hard to believe the company behind Street Fighter, Resident Evil, Monster Hunter, and Devil May Cry were capable of anything else, but alas, they were.
Alright, we're making some progress here. I wrote my name.
Captain Commando, Ghosts and Goblins, Darkstalkers, Midnight Wanderers, Knights of the Round, Mega Twins, Magic Sword, Echo Fighters, 1941?
I didn't know I had to write a history one too.
Yeah, as you can see, they made a lot of these back in the day. Hell, if it weren't for the Capcom Classics collection games, I probably wouldn't know what half of these are, but then again I probably would because it's Capcom and I like their games. Wish I could say the same for you. There is one Capcom game series, however, that always intrigued me growing up, and that's Capcom's Final Fight. Against who? Like, I feel like these developers are trying to relay a message here. Like, Capcom, who do you want to fight so bad that you had to put it on 2 separate game series? And Nintendo, who do you want to punch so bad? Who pissed you guys off? Final Fight for me felt like one of those series I knew I would have loved getting into as a kid, but instead I was busy being a fucking dork and never got around to it. But that's all gonna change today. Once I finally put this chapter behind me, I can write 7 more for a college assignment.
I better get f***ed after finishing this.
Oh boy, is Final Fight a mess. I obviously mean the timeline and characters when I say that there is a lot of stuff that goes on, not only in the Final Fight series, but also the Street Fighter series, oddly enough. They both take place in the same universe and have their own respective timeline, but Capcom still managed to find a way to mesh the two together in a way to where Final Fight characters aren't even being labeled as Final Fight characters anymore, they're just Street Fighter characters now. And that's kind of a bummer because I find the entirety of Final Fight to be pretty damn interesting, regardless of it being mixed in with Street Fighter. It has its own world and characters with their own stories, and in my opinion, even now, a lot of potential, but that begs the question, what is Final Fight and why is it so close to Street Fighter? Are they dating? Are you brushing your teeth?
Yeah.
So Final Fight is a beat-em-up series developed by Capcom. It's actually one of their more older series, going as far back as 1989 for arcade machines, 2 years after the first Street Fighter game releasing in 1987. The game's producer Yoshiki Okamoto cited Double Dragon 2 The Revenge as a basis for Final Fight's concept and was originally called Street Fighter 89 while being shown at trade shows. The reason behind this was because Final Fight was initially supposed to be a Street Fighter sequel, going as far as referring to one of the characters as a former Street Fighter. There were also plans to have both Ryu and Ken as the 2 main characters of the game, but that idea was scrapped for a new plot and setting, which is honestly for the best. Ryu and Ken are better off beating each other up. I guess that somewhat explains how Final Fight and Street Fighter started their relationship, but it doesn't really explain much outside of Final Fight initially being a sequel to Street Fighter, so I want to get to the bottom of this. Are they f***ing or not? Well, from what I could gather, the first Final Fight game takes place pretty much after the first Street Fighter game, and to briefly explain this one, Final Fight 1 takes place in this city known as Metro City, where they have this gang organization known as the Mad Gear Gang, who just so happen to be the bad guys.
But why are they so bad?
They're bad because they're a gang organization. If it weren't obvious enough. They also kidnapped this girl named Jessica.
Damn it, Jessica!
Who just so happens to be this man's daughter. And this guy's friend. And this guy's girlfriend.
That's f***ed up!
These 3 are Mike Haggar, Cody, and Guy, the main characters of Final Fight. And Mike Haggar returns in the second installment, Final Fight 2, which takes place immediately after the first game, but Cody and Guy are nowhere to be seen, so in their place, we get 2 new characters, Maki and Carlos. I'm assuming Maki is supposed to be Guy's replacement and Carlos is Cody's replacement, and the reason I say that is because look at them. But why are Cody and Guy being replaced here? Well, Final Fight 2 kicks off with Cody and Jessica going on a vacation, Guy going back to his training schedule, and Mike Haggar returning home to continue to rule Metro City as its mayor.
What, is he supposed to be God now?
But secretly, the Mad Gear Gang were regrouping. Their first plan of attack? Kidnap Guy's fiancé and her father. What, they didn't learn from the first game? This then leads to Maki contacting Mike Haggar for help as her and Guy's fiancé are sisters, so they both agree to meet up in Hong Kong and Carlos joins them because he apparently owes Mike Haggar and Guy a lot, plus he just loves kicking ass.
This is some good shit.
Well, that answers the question of why Cody and Guy were replaced in Final Fight 2, even though Guy should have been the first person Maki calls, thus making him absent here feel kinda weird, but it's fine because we got Carlos, and he loves kick-ass too! There is a Final Fight 3, which is what I mainly want to focus on here, but surprisingly enough, it doesn't take place after Final Fight 2, instead we get some Street Fighter in the mix. Why? I understand they're trying to do this thing where a couple of their series take place in the same universe, therefore they have to be connected to each other in some way, but my question is, Capcom, why are you doing it like this? You're just making the process of wanting to learn more about the timeline and lore tedious. Like, you're telling me I'd have to play through both Final Fight 1 and 2, then take out my Street Fighter Alpha Anthology and play through Street Fighter Alpha 1 and 2, then I can play through Final Fight 3, and then Street Fighter Alpha 3 and the rest of the Street Fighter games onward. Like, what the hell is this? Kingdom Hearts? This is a beat 'em up and fighting game series. Why are you making things so complicated? Well, if I want to get into Kingdom Hearts seriously, I should obviously start with Kingdom Hearts 1, but wait! This game takes place before that game, and Mickey Mouse is in Kingdom Hearts, and Epic Mickey came out almost 10 years after Kingdom Hearts 1, so I should obviously play Epic Mickey 2 before Kingdom Hearts 2.
Fuck my brain.
There's not even a set story in the Alpha games, it's all based on the individual characters' arcade modes, which I guess is a quote-unquote story mode for them, but it's not really all that. Plus there are only like 3 Final Fight characters in the Alpha games anyway, Guy, Cody, and Rolento, and who the hell cared about Rolento?
Mom said my dad did.
As much as I'm not a fan of the whole timeline thing they're doing here, these games are in the same universe, thus having them be connected to each other. Like a failing marriage. Final Fight 3 is the last canon Final Fight game in the timeline, and I guess Capcom wanted to go big with this one because they haven't touched it since. But just how did they go big with this one? Well, in order to figure that out, I'm gonna have to play the game, and it just so happens that I have a console that can play this game perfectly, and without it I'd be lost in life, so why not give the game a whirl? I'm gonna play Final Fight 3! What, I said I'd be lost in life without it, that doesn't make it good. Starting up the game, we immediately get a cutscene outlining the story. After the Mad Gear Gang was destroyed, the citizens of Metro City finally thought their nightmare was over.
Did they really?
But without the Mad Gear to control the underworld, the street gangs fought amongst themselves for power over the city.
Isn't there like a president of this place?
In the end, the Skullcross Gang reigned supreme.
Who?
Several months later, Mayor Mike Hager got a call from an old friend.
Is it my dad?
God damn it. So his old friend is Guy, and they're having a good time catching up when all of a sudden, an explosion goes off. Enter Lucia, a detective of the Special Crime Unit and one of the new characters in the game. Apparently the city is under attack if it weren't obvious from the act of terrorism outside. Like, are explosions normal in Metro City? They're having a huge riot in the center of town, so Mike Hager asks for Guy's help when this mysterious man comes out of nowhere stating that he can lead them to the source. His identity is irrelevant according to him, so all we really need to know is that he knows where they're headed, so they hit the streets.
I tried that once and I broke my fucking hand.
Hopping into the main menu here, we have a couple of options. 1P play, 2P play, auto 2P play, and options. This menu is pretty much the same as Final Fight 2's aside from the new auto 2P play mode, which is just playing the game with the computer so you feel less lonely, and if I were to give it a compliment here, it works. That's it. The only thing I'm not seeing here that raises my eyebrows is the load game option. I'd assume that'd be a staple at that point in time. Like, this game came out in 1995, December 21st of 1995 to be exact, and we've been getting save state options for at least a good 2 to 4 years at that point, so with it not being here, feels kind of odd. Starting the game, we get a new character select screen. It's not a huge change, just one character slot here for choosing your different characters instead of all of them being visible on screen like in the previous 2 games. At least here we can finally identify who that mysterious guy was in the opening cutscene. Thanks for not introducing yourself, Dean. I think I'm gonna go with Guy for my playthrough here and keep it a little familiar. I'm honestly really excited to get into the game and see all the new improvements that Capcom did, so here we go. What is this? This game looks almost exactly like the previous 2 Final Fight games. Where are my Street Fighter Alpha-esque visuals with all its brightness and colors and flashy art style? This game just looks dark and sad with no real sign of evolution. I would have hoped they'd at least put a little bit of Street Fighter Alpha's art style in here to show some progression, but I'm not seeing anything. I'm almost half expecting the game to be rated M for mature just due to this depressing ass lighting. I could understand if Final Fight had its own unique art style that could be updated by tweaking it a little bit with new releases, but it shares a similar art style to the Street Fighter 2 games, which even those had a lot more brightness and color to them. Hell, I'd even argue the previous 2 Final Fight games look better than this. When I look at Final Fight 3, I think to myself, man, this game needs therapy. It looks sad, and I don't want to think that about this game. It's my first time playing it. Bad visuals aside, Final Fight 3 at least feels a little better than Final Fight 1 and 2, and I'm mainly talking about the speed here. It's a bit faster compared to those games, which is one thing I can say I appreciate. In terms of physics and animations, it feels pretty identical to the previous games. Now, is that entirely a bad thing? No. I just think considering when this came out and the hardware it came out for, it could have had a bit more fluidity and smoothness behind it. Like, this came out in 1995 for the Super Nintendo. I'm sure if Capcom really wanted this to feel like a Super Nintendo game, they could have, but instead it just feels like a more juiced up arcade game for console. I'd say if there was anything in here that felt better than the previous 2 games by a long shot, it would be the gameplay. It's still Final Fight with that stereotypical beat 'em up fashion. You can walk left and right, up and down, jump, punch, kick, everything seems to be in order here. That's how these games typically are. But Final Fight 3 takes it a step further. You can sprint now! It's like a staple nowadays for beat 'em ups, but for a Final Fight game in 1995 for the Super Nintendo? Capcom. You spoil me too much. Even if some of your other beat 'em up series, such as Captain Commando and Knights of the Round, had the exact same thing and those released in 1991, it's fine. I'm happy we got something new here. What I also really like about this is how you can pull off a sort of sprinting combo attack. I call it that because unlike most beat 'em ups, or at least the ones I played, instead of doing a heavy hitting attack that'll probably end up being pretty slow but powerful, you're now pulling off at least a decent 4-hit combo, and it's pretty fun to use.
Well, I just learned something while writing my essay. I could be a kick-ass runner!
Another little minor improvement I noticed with the gameplay is you can now do your special attack with 1 button instead of 2. For instance, Guy here has a tornado kick, and if I were to use him in Final Fight 1, I'd have to press both A and B at the same time. And while you can still do that in Final Fight 3, it's a lot more convenient now to just press the A button, although I never really understood why it takes a bit of your health away every time you use it. Like, I'm not doing anything, I'm just spinning around. Every other character here also has their own sort of special attack. Lucia has a higher spinning kick than Guy, Dean has an electric karate chop or whatever this is, and Mike Hager has the same thing he had in the previous 2 games where he just spins around with his arms out, similar to Guy's. Final Fight 3 also seems to be taking some things from Street Fighter, such as the ability to be able to input certain commands, like the quarter circle punch. I've only ever noticed it working with Guy and Lucia. Dean and Mike Hager seem to have a different control scheme here, which I can at least say is kinda cool because they're trying to make the characters feel different from each other, but if I'm being honest, these commands don't really feel like they fit here. They fit more with Street Fighter because they were made for that. Street Fighter was an arcade series before anything with joystick and buttons, so inputting those commands were a lot easier and quicker, while Final Fight 3 was on the Super Nintendo with the D-pad, so trying to emulate joystick and button commands with the D-pad and buttons just feels awkward to me. But you're playing this with the Wii U gamepad, so use the analog sticks, bitch. That's not going to change the way the game feels. It's still an SNES game with an SNES control scheme just put on the Wii U, and if I'm being honest, it feels worse using the analog sticks here. It just makes the game feel more stiff, which, to be fair, it did come out in 1995, so it's no Scott Pilgrim, but it's also not a game made for this, so f*** the gamepad. Now, you can play this with the Wii Classic Controller Pro if you really want to emulate the feeling of a classic controller for the Wii U, but you're not going to get any brownie points on the playground for doing this. I mean, I guess it's better than nothing, you know, it could be worse. You could be playing with this. There is another Street Fighter-esque thing they seem to have thrown in here, and that's a super meter. It operates pretty much the same as Street Fighter in terms of filling it up, where the more damage you deal, the more it steadily goes up, but in terms of pulling off the actual super moves themselves, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing, so as far as I'm concerned, I'm better off not using it. There's no tutorial option, no command list, hell, there's not even a pause menu, and I would think that'd be the bare minimum here, but no. Aside from all of that gameplay stuff, Final Fight 3 isn't really that much different than the last 2 games. You're still walking left or right, beating up random people, fighting a boss and going to the next level, same thing, rinse and repeat. The only differences worth mentioning are the enemies, locations, some story stuff, and I guess the minigames. The story stuff is the second biggest thing I noticed aside from the gameplay, and I'll be honest, for what we're getting here, Capcom didn't do that bad. They added more cutscenes and dialogue, as well as character-specific endings depending on who you play as, which I didn't get. It seems like Capcom wanted Final Fight 3 to feel like an actual console game this time around. Like, they went out of their way to expand the story for something as simple as Final Fight. Meanwhile, Sonic was making you read his autobiography. I also like what they're doing with the locations here, as it fits in more with the story being expanded and actually tries to give you somewhat of a reason to care about this place. The first two games felt pretty cut and dry with their settings. Final Fight 1 took place in Metro City like in Final Fight 3, but Final Fight 1 just feels more empty to me with no real sense of world building. It's just walk left to right, beat up these guys, walk left to right, beat up this big guy, oh now we're in a subway. And Final Fight 2 isn't really that much different aside from the fact that you're not in Metro City anymore, but instead you're going around the world, like Hong Kong, Japan, or France, so I can at least say I'm happy we're getting something different here. But Final Fight 3's world just feels more lived in to me, and it's mainly because we can see characters actually interacting with each other about the world more, which does a lot for helping it build up in my opinion. There is one thing I'm rather curious about when it comes to these locations. Why do they have to punch and kick through everything just to get to the next area? Like, it's pretty cool, yeah, they're strong, but for a dumb 6-year-old like me to see that, our wall's been like this ever since. I know what I'm doing when I visit Paris. Property damage.
I was banned from the country.
So the enemies here, this Skullcross gang, why is it that they're the bad guys here? Well, I mean, they started a riot downtown, blew up some buildings, they killed Dean's family, and are trying to take over the city it seems, so I guess that explains what makes them so bad. But why? Is there an actual reason behind all of this, or are they just bad just for the sake of being bad? It makes them feel one-dimensional in my opinion. Like, throughout my entire time playing the game, I still don't know who the leader is. And the regular enemies are different enough. We've got some new guys here, like these little rolling guys, and I don't like them that much. I think it says a lot about how Capcom went out of their way to make things different here and really improve on everything, but not enough to where it warrants us getting any more games. Like, we get entirely new enemies, a part of a new crime organization, with 4 playable characters this time, in different locations depending on who you play as, who I should also mention again, have their own dedicated story endings, and it just seems like such a waste to not do anything else with the series. Like, putting Cody and Lucia in Street Fighter V was an option, but I didn't want that option.
Get
It just makes me upset seeing a series with potential like this go to waste. Like, could you imagine all the crazy stuff Capcom would be able to do in this day and age with Final Fight? It'd be insane with the number of lives they'd probably manage to ruin, but instead Final Fight characters are being reduced to seasonal DLC. Oh, how far you've fallen. Final Fight 3 is something I really wish Capcom would have expanded on and gave us more of. I know we're getting Final Fight characters in Street Fighter games with their own stories and development, which is really cool because it shows that Capcom still recognizes them, but at the same time, I feel like it kind of takes away from what they've initially established. Sure, they take place in the same universe, and I already know that Final Fight was supposed to be a sequel to Street Fighter, but after the first game was released, it was already set in stone with its own world and characters, and I want more of that. Like, if we can get Streets of Rage 4 20 years after Streets of Rage 3, Final Fight 4 better happen before I finish college. So pretty much what I was able to gather here is that Final Fight 3 is the definitive way of going about playing Final Fight. Sure, it doesn't have some characters like Cody, Maki, and Carlos, and I wasn't able to really see any of the older minigames, like the one where you have to destroy a car for instance, but everything else they've added here seems to make up for that and more, like with the better feeling gameplay in different locations depending on who you decide to play as. Not to mention the story feels much more expansive with the story and characters interacting with each other more. And even after all that research and writing, I still only managed to write my name!